Mrs. Sheeta, an Asian mother who lives in Holcomb, is riding home with Mr. Clutter from the 4-H meeting in Garden City. She asked Mr. Clutter his opinion on giving her husband a set of gold teeth for Christmas, asking if it would be an insulting gift. In this case, verisimilitude helps to paint Mr. Clutter as a warm and important member of the community who others seek advice from and is willing to give Mrs. Sheeta, an Asian woman, a ride home, even though at the time she may be considered an outcast from society.
Capote concludes chapter 13 of part 1 with a statement from Bobby, since he was the last to see the Clutters alive. In this statement, Bobby states that as he was leaving the Clutter home, in hindsight, he feels as though someone was likely standing amongst the trees, waiting for him to leave to enter the Clutter home. This is likely a fictionalized account of Bobby's words that is exaggerated by Capote to foreshadow what is to come in his novel and to create an eerie tone. Nevertheless, this is presented as truth, making this an example of verisimilitude. Capote's description of Nancy's diary is an example of verisimilitude. Capote even includes example entries from the diary in his description. There's no way to verify if these entries are true. However, in including these entries, the diary seems more real and the reader gets a more rounded view of Nancy's character.
Susan Kidwell is at the funeral home in Garden City to look at the Clutter's bodies. What she sees is very disturbing. They have cotton on their face, and she notices that Susan has on a red dress. That Nancy has on a red dress that Susan helped her make. In this case, verisimilitude helps to contrast these significant members of the community, this lively family that everybody seemed to, at least on the outside, seemed to be perfect, that everybody seemed to adore, and now how lifeless and dead they are in just a short amount of time.
On page 108, Capote uses an example of verisimilitude where he talks about the food that Dick is eating in Mexico, specifically a cold, oily tortilla. And Capote uses this to sort of indicate how their big dream and their goal isn't exactly going how they want, because obviously a cold or oily tortilla doesn't sound that appetizing. And it also sets the setting of Mexico and where they're at in their journey. And it's an example of verisimilitude because we obviously have no clue if this actually happened, and it seems like a minor detail that Capote just threw in there to kind of emphasize where they are and why it might not be exactly what they wanted.
Dick and Perry are riding in the car with Mr. Bell, a man who pulled over to pick the two up from the side of the road when they were hitchhiking. Dick tells Perry to pass him a match, which is a code word that the two use when they're ready to kill somebody, in this case, Mr. Bell. Luckily, at that exact moment, a third hitchhiker appeared on the side of the road, and Mr. Bell pulled over, which didn't give Dick and Perry the chance to kill him. In this case, this example of verisimilitude plays the role of establishing the ease at which Dick was ready to kill somebody, and how prepared and trained they were to execute these killings to their own advantage, and how little thought Dick put into it.
On page 199 and 200, Perry asks Dick about a newspaper article he's come across about some people that were killed in Tallahassee in a crime similar to that of the one in Kansas, and is very excited that it wasn't them that did the crime, and was comparing the people who did commit it as being lunatics or crazy. And this is an example of verisimilitude because it's dialogue that Capote has created, and there's no evidence that this actual conversation took place between Dick and Perry. It serves as an indicator of their mental state and specifically Perry's, as he seems kind of unsure towards the killing and happy that it wasn't them that killed again.
Mrs. Meyer's first impressions of Perry and their conversation about Spanish rice is an example of verisimilitude. It's known that these conversations and impressions were fictionalized by Capote. However, they are presented as truth in the novel. This is done by Capote to humanize Perry and to further his commentary concerning the death penalty.
On page 246, an example of verisimilitude that Capote uses is the comparison of Dick and Perry to two cats. He says that these cats are dirty strays with strange and clever habits, and the reader pictures them kind of sneaking around. So the assumption that these cats are a metaphor for Dick and Perry can be made because they have the same type behaviors. And this is an example of verisimilitude because there's no evidence that these cats exist whatsoever. It's just Capote's use of exaggeration and giving the reader something to associate Dick and Perry's behavior with.
During their time on death row, Dick and Perry met an 18-year-old named Lowell Lee Andrews, who was convicted of killing his parents and sister. He was described as a very smart man who fantasized about a life of a gangster and professional hitman who often corrected the grammar of others in the prison and was, just generally intelligent. In this case, this example of verisimilitude helps to provide a personality and some characterization of these criminals sitting on death row who often don't have that same privilege. They're just cast off as criminals. So when Capote is describing the other people on death row, similar to the story of Dick and Perry, they have to provide some perspective and to humanize these criminals.